perhaps we can gradually start to begin. My name is Shannon Pfohman, and I'm a project director at AEIDL and also the moderator of today's webinar. So welcome to everyone. The title of our webinar is Nature and Biodiversity in Focus, Insights and Impacts from Projects. So these will be, the project in particular will be the Communities for Climate project. That is just about to end. It's a pilot action of the European Commission of DG Regio, and as well as some of the other projects that will be presented by our European Commission speaker today, Paul Webb. If we could move to the next slide. I'd like to highlight some of the house rules as we're waiting for more people to join. Many of you have been well versed in organizing and participating in webinars since COVID, but in case you've forgotten, we'd like to remind you to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and we'll record the webinar in order to enable some follow-up along the communication realm of the highlighted elements of the webinar. And if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand in the tools below so that we can see. And if you have questions, you can already write them in the chat. We'll be moderating the chat as well. And what's probably important for you also to know that we will share the slides with you following this webinar. So you'll have all the information made available to you, so you don't have to take such detailed minutes as we move forward. We have a very interesting lineup of speakers today. First, we start with Claire Jordan, EIDL's Managing Director, who will say a few words about EIDL and ELIF and introduce the new thematic community that we're launching today. This will be followed by a presentation by Paul Webb, who's the Head of Department for Green Europe Research at the European Research Executive Agency of the European Commission, who'll be talking about the importance of nature restoration and biodiversity and providing some examples of his own experiences within the research agency. Then Mark Richards will be speaking from the perspective of the Aurora Climate Garden in Hungary, which is one of the local communities that will be profiled today. This will be followed by Andi Linder from the Impulsbüro Agroforest Altmark in Germany, who's linked with the Professional Association of Agroforestry. He'll be explaining about the agroforestry project in Sieben, Linden in Germany. And then Laura Kaestele from ECOLISE will be joining us shortly to moderate the question and answer and the clarifying session so that we can enter into a discussion around the topics and hear also from the other speakers online, or the other participants rather, who might want to come in and compare situations and their own realities on the ground. And so we only have an hour and a half to discuss quite a lot of detailed information. And we know from one of our speakers already that he has just too much to say in 15 minutes. So I don't want to take more time now in the logistical arrangements of this. And I'd like to move forward already by giving the floor to Claire Jordan to talk about EIDL. I said that. There she goes. See movement.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
So if we could change the PowerPoint to the next slide.
I'm Claire Jordan. I'm the Managing Director here at EIDL, and we're very happy to host this meeting today. Welcome again to all of you. So EIDL is the European Association for Innovation in Local Development. We're a Brussels-based association who operate Europe-wide. And our mission is to learn from and support community-led innovation with a view to revitalize local communities across Europe. And we do that in three main areas, namely territorial and rural development, employment, entrepreneurship and inclusion, and last but not least, environment and climate action. a lot of what we do is to support and facilitate peer learning among local and national actors across Europe, analyze and evaluate relevant EU policies, and advocate for enhanced support to community local action to help build a Europe for citizens. So it was in this context that we launched the European Local Innovation Forum, ELIF. And ELIF is primarily a space where experts and organizations who operate at the local level can connect with other relevant stakeholders, including researchers and policymakers, and more concretely exchange ideas, learn from a broad variety of experiences across Europe, and also draw lessons to boost local-led innovation. So today's webinar is the launch of the new thematic community of ELIF, a thematic community specifically devoted to local innovation in relation to climate and the environment. And so this thematic community will promote innovation in local environmental and climate action across Europe. It will build on co-creation and place-based approaches to address local concerns and align with strategic partners. And so very concretely, our hope is that through this new strand of ELIF, we will foster synergies, we will expand expertise, enable peer learning, and explore pathways to systems change. In addition to today's event, there will be 3 more webinars in 2025, drawing from the experiences of local communities, and they will be organized by subtopics. So the next webinar, which will take place in September, will focus on renewable energy. It will be followed by a webinar on water resource management on the 1st of October. And finally, one on circular economy on the 18th of November, sorry. All of this information and more can be found online, so you don't need to be taking notes, but I'm sure my colleagues will put the relevant link to the webpage that has all these details. And again, in those follow-up webinars, you will be able to hear from experiences that all stem from the recently implemented Communities for Climate pilot action, which Shannon referred to, initiated by DG Regio of the European Commission. And I think that's it for my little introduction. So on that note, I wish you a very fruitful and informative session. Thank you, and back to you, Shannon.
Thanks so much, Claire. So it's very exciting for us to be able to launch the new thematic community today. And we wanted to take a moment to just gauge the experiences and expertise of those online with us. So we can go to the Mentimeter poll. You see the chat, the link in the chat, and you can scan the QR code. And there we have a series of questions that we'd like to share with you. So if you could go through these questions, we'll take a moment to answer them. And I'm assuming Julian will be able to share them online as well. So what do you think will help the urban environment most in the climate future? Go ahead and just put your answer down, and then we'll see after what. Okay, we've got a lot of people choosing trees. 6 for water, 3 for soil already, 7, it's increasing. Air conditioners doesn't seem to be the solution. So we have a lot more people online than are participating in the Mentimeter, it seems. Maybe we can move to the next slide, the next question. What do you feel are the 3 most limiting factors to greening urban environments? So obviously you can pick 3 answers. There we have some clear tendencies. As people still keep voting, the numbers are increasing, but quite a clear outcome in terms of lack of political will, which is all the more important that we have policymakers joining the call with us today, as well as the obsolete infrastructure design. Environmental awareness is an issue, as well as, of course, limited funding. There's challenges around cars, real estate prices, community support, data. No one's picked technology, but that might be an issue. We'll get to it in the presentation. So maybe we can move to the next question. What's the most effective place to begin regeneration of urban landscapes for climate resilience? So what's most effective? Just take some time to answer. So there we see some tendencies as well, with biodiversity restoration and community building and eco and climate education, all pretty much leading, followed by tree planting, political activation, activism, water management, and soil management. We have some alluding to anti-pollution and bike paths, waste recovery. So that gives you some idea. Maybe we can move to the next question. And how would you rate your knowledge and level of expertise on the topic of nature and biodiversity? So we have some experts somewhere in the middle, some beginners. That will make it more difficult for the speakers today to try to speak to all the different levels, not to lose those behind, but meet them all in the middle. So maybe we can move to the next slide, the next question. And how would you rate your knowledge and level of expertise on local innovation? So again, and you'll find that the question of innovation will continue to be quite important in moving forward with these ELIF webinars, since we're aiming to always seek out innovative practices. But of course, what's innovative in one region might not be very innovative in another. And so it's always relevant in terms of timing and contextualization, time and place. So there you have some analysis of who's on the call with us today. Quite some people in the middle when it comes to these topics around biodiversity and innovation. So if we can move to the next slide. So we're just moving out of Mentimeter, and it's actually, we're going to be sharing Paul Webb's PowerPoint presentation next. So thank you for taking the time to fill in the Mentimeter questions so we can better gauge who's with us. The responses will be addressed by the different speakers, so I won't begin to speak to them or provide further information. That will come from our speakers. So for now, I'd like to introduce Mr. Paul Webb, who's the head of Department of Green Europe in the European Research Agency of the European Commission, who's going to be presenting some of the experiences from the research projects that his unit is funding through Horizon Europe, I imagine, and probably others. So Paul, thank you for speaking today and making the connection between the European level and the local level, and yeah, hearing our local examples. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much to you, Shannon, as well, and everybody at AEIDL, I think you call it, AEIDL, for the efforts that you're making on this important subject. So yes, I am Paul Webb. I'm head of department of the Green Europe department at the Research Executive Agency. That is a funding agency for research projects under the European Commission's research framework program, Horizon Europe. And in particular, for me, it's cluster 6 of that program, if you know it. It relates to biodiversity, nature, food, agriculture, forestry, and the bioeconomy. And of course, we fund the research. We select, hopefully, the best projects and fund them. But we're looking to do so much more as well in relation to communicating and disseminating what we found, what we call valorization. So trying to make sure that these actually move forward to being used, the research projects, and in something that we call feedback to policy. So trying to gather the evidence base to feedback to policymakers to say what they can do. And just linking to that, back in 2020, 2021, there were the first thoughts of a nature restoration law. And at that point, for once, we were looking forward. And we were starting to fund research projects aiming to prove that nature-based solutions can be effective and can be cost-effective as well in addressing ecological and biodiversity challenges. And we had quite a lot of projects that we were funding. These were multi-million, multinational research projects. So don't worry that I've seen today probably the projects are quite a bit smaller. Don't worry about that. There's plenty of room for everybody, but that's what we've been doing. And many, many great projects. And we've been meeting over the last year or so to try and harvest the results. And that's what I thought I'd tell you about. And if you just go on to the next screen, you can have a look at just a few of the projects that you might be interested in if you want to go away and have a look at them. And at the bottom there, you'll see the Network Nature. Network Nature is a project that we finance. It's not a research project as such. It's what we call a coordination and support action. So they're supposed to build the networks around this area, and it's very, very wide and European. We had an event in September 2024. It was about busting the myths that nature-based solutions are not economic. They're too complex, they're too expensive to consider. And there's a lot of different research projects were represented there. And I've just put at the bottom there is the event for 2025 is on the 16th of September in Brussels. And it is free. So if anyone wants to come along, they're very welcome. I mean, it's not totally free. I have to pay for it, but you don't have to pay to come along. That's the main thing. So you'll all be very welcome. You can sign up to that from now on. And Network Nature is an organization that you may want to try and link with if you are working in this area. Go Green Roots was a very, very interesting project that finished about the middle of last year. And that was 40 different organizations from all over Europe that were using a participatory approach to create urban well-being spaces in 6 cities around Europe. Things like green corridors, pocket parks, linear parks, and so on. And what was really interesting about that was they actually put all these corridors and parks and so on in very difficult areas of some of our big cities, but working with the local people so that these projects actually had a chance to live after the project had ended. And that was very interesting, that they hope that they can keep those projects working. They'll look back at it at some point. And then we had another great meeting in March this year to discuss the results of 4 ecosystem restoration upscaling projects, and that's Merlin, West Coast, Superb and Waterlands. And these 4 projects actually created 71 restoration sites across Europe with 149 partner organizations with a large network of stakeholders at local and regional level. They worked on coastal areas, they worked on areas around peat bogs, wetlands, forests and so on, thinking about nature-based solutions, biodiversity and so on. And I mean, just for the anecdote really, but the West Coast project had a big part of its project that was actually working in Valencia and Catalonia on thinking about where the rivers flow and trying to put back the original flow of rivers. They didn't have a lot of success with the local authorities until the terrible floods in Valencia last year, where there is suddenly a lot of interest in what they've been doing. And just as I was writing this, just thinking about what a shame it is that we have to wait for a tragedy before we start actually thinking about these things. Anyway, now that we've got the results from all these different projects, I think we have some real evidence and then the opportunity to influence these nature restoration plans. And at the last meeting I mentioned, the ones with Merlin and the others, we actually had an opportunity to discuss with people from the member states who have to create these nature restoration plans. And some of you will know that, maybe all of you, these plans have to be developed by the 1st of September 2026, and they are required to build on the latest scientific evidence on how to create the best possible restoration impact. And if that's what they're supposed to do, we then, from science, we have to produce the evidence that people can use. And I have to tell you that the colleagues who have to build these nature restoration plans in each member state were really feeling very overwhelmed, because the task is massive, and that's not really surprising. And one of the reasons it's massive is because of the real difficulty in developing a national plan. They have to develop a national plan, but we know that nature and biodiversity is not national. It's local, it's regional. It's by field, by town, by very small areas. We've got to take into account local conditions, local needs and local problems. And I think really that's where all the work that collectively we performed, EU level, regional, local level, has to come together to try to influence these nature restoration plans. And I think if we look at the situation in the European Union today, we have to admit that we are struggling to get the same priority focus on environmental issues today that we were a few years ago. We've had quite significant headwinds around the nature restoration law, you may remember, and around the whole of the Green Deal. It's really quite difficult for many of us who are working in this area. And it's quite different from when we started this series of projects on nature-based solutions, because that was the start of the Green Deal. We thought it was a real irreversible movement towards a significant transformation and protection of biodiversity, water resources, emphasis on nature and so on. But it's not so easy now, but we can't give up. We can't give up. And I think that these nature restoration plans are a magnificent opportunity to make some real progress. And what I know from the research projects that we funded and from some of the work that you've been doing, and I've seen in the case studies that follow that Shannon did supply to me last week, is that we do have solutions to offer. We have the energy and commitment around Europe. And we have the expertise, we have the enthusiasm. What we've got to do now is to try and harness all these in support of these nature restoration plans, because I just say to you that it's the same message I passed to the researchers at the end of this last meeting with Merlin and the rest. I think the nature restoration plans are a great chance, but it's possibly the last chance that we have for a while for all of us to have a real influence on the direction of nature protection and restoration in our regions and countries. So now we have to use these real life examples that we've developed to demonstrate really what is possible and how our solutions are effective and, probably just as important, cost effective. So I'm stuck here in Brussels, like some of you. I'll be doing my part around what I can influence and what I can change, but I hope that you'll also try to do yours. You need to find out who's responsible for the nature restoration plans in your country. You need to reach out to them. You need to lobby them mercilessly, in fact. Force them to listen. And attend the events, make your proposals and so on to make sure that practical local solutions are taken up, local issues are considered. And if you're not already talking to researchers from your area, some of these projects, I hope if you go and look into them, you will almost certainly find a partner from not far away who would be interested to help you. So I think collectively we have a lot of solutions to offer. We need to get out now and ensure that these are brought together in these nature restoration plans that I think could be, should be very, very important in protecting nature in the future. So I'll stop there, Shannon, if that's okay. And I'd really love to see many of you at the Network Nature conference in September. I'll be there on the spot, I think. So any of you, please take the opportunity to reach out to me. Thank you very much, Shannon.
Thanks so much to you, Paul. That's been really enlightening. I know I've already registered to the event that you mentioned, and I hope to see others there as well. What is particularly useful is the information you provided for us in terms of how to influence the nature restoration plans. So we'll research exactly who we need to reach out to and provide continued experts and lobby them and suggest. Very helpful. Are you able to stay for the whole webinar for us with us today, Paul?
I'm intending to stay, yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, great, because I imagine there'll be some more questions. I saw one question, for instance, has already come about whether green has gone clean. So we will see if there's more time for you to come back to that as we proceed. So the next speaker is going to be Mark Richards. So we can share that PowerPoint. Mark Richards is essentially one of the founding members of the Aurora Climate Garden, which is a community garden that has established itself essentially since 2013. And he is a community gardener since 2013 and a permaculture designer since 2019. He'll tell you more about the Aurora Climate Garden during his presentation. But essentially, through his climate advocacy in the 8th district of Budapest, he has become involved in urban climate mitigation around the city using nature-based solutions for biodiversity restoration, soil remediation, rainwater management, and waste recovery. And so he will tell you more about this project and the work that his community has engaged in. So thanks so much, Mark, for joining us and sharing more your experiences. I give you the floor now.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here and to tell everybody about our project. Our project started in 2019, just before COVID. So we had a little period of excited beginnings, where we got a parking lot in the 8th district, and they told us, well, we can't have a beer garden here, so we can't get permission, so why don't you green it up a little bit so we can use it and we can have people in here. And so we started greening it up very slowly. We were working with a number of other communities in that space, and I'm going to talk about a little bit about the history first of what we did, and then the methods we use, and then what we're looking forward to in the future. This is the origin story. I was called in as the compost guy to compost for another group that makes food every week in the garden called Food Not Bombs, and they take waste food and cook it and feed it to the homeless, and then anything that's not usable they give to us to compost. And that was really the dynamo for the entire project. Can we go to the next slide? This is what it looked like when we started, and that space over there is where Food Not Bombs worked or works every week. They brought me 150 liters of green waste, and I had to create a composting system that would handle that in very little space. And we did that. And the group that we all started with was interested in getting away from the food growing model. Because there are plenty of community gardens in Budapest which grow food, but we were interested in more working with nature and working with climate solutions. And it was very interesting to me in my personal experience that very often all of the people in the food growing communities were very excited about nature and about climate questions and wanted to hear more. But when it came to implementing them, it was a very scary thing for them, and they pushed back and really did not want to get that nature near their tomatoes, if you know what I mean. So that was an interesting watershed moment for me, where I realized we need to break from that food community model, and call ourselves a climate garden. And it was, as you can see in this early photograph, it was pretty absurd for us to be calling ourselves a climate garden at that time. But we had a lot of enthusiasm, and we also did something interesting in two ways with the community, that we had no dues to pay. So there was no entry-level wall. Anybody could come in. And there was no real responsibilities. You didn't have to come to meetings. You didn't have to participate so many hours a month. You just donated your time, which was very important to us, and as much as you could, whenever you could, and that was fine. So it's a very loose kind of community, and in that way, we grew very organically. So there was no real plan at the beginning. There were, except to green things. And so, and since we're not an organization, registered organization, we also couldn't really apply for money, or very much money. And at one point, we realized it wouldn't, but I realized, because I'd been taking this permaculture course, and they're always telling you the problem is the solution. And I turned it around and I said, like, what if we use this lack of money as a positive and make it and challenge ourselves to green this area without money, using only city waste? And that's what we did. So we started composting and digging holes in the parking lot. You see, wherever you see these dirt patches, that's about 12 hours of pickaxing through a parking lot of compressed rock dust. And then we started putting compost everywhere, which at the time I thought was the cure for everything. I'm pretty convinced it is a cure for most things. But what happened was over the first winter, we realized, and into the second spring, we realized that even though we were planting tomatoes and vegetables and things, garden things, we were getting a lot of trees popping up out of the mulch. So we had been mulching over the summer and the winter with leaf bags. And these leaf bags, which are thrown away, became a huge resource for us, because we didn't know it at the time, but there were many, many tree seeds swept up with the leaves. So in the right conditions, the trees started growing, and we got lots and lots of trees, and all for free. So we didn't have to buy them and plant them. So after we started working with the soil, we found this concept of the climate garden, basically, which said that allegedly from after 3 to 5 years, the entire space can be self-sustainable. Self-sustaining. And we were very suspicious of the initiatives we'd seen where many people use the word sustainable on all ends of the spectrum of how sustainable something is. So self-sustaining was a really good goal for us to work towards. And if we could go to the next slide. So what happened was, after 5 years, we got a canopy, which the trees got big enough so that they connected, and we got a microclimate. And that microclimate helped protect the garden, and it helps us use a whole lot less water. And so we gave it a test and stopped using city drinking water to irrigate last year in January. And we collected rainwater off of one of the small roofs. So we had about 500 liters of rainwater to work with, but that's really, for a garden this size, only about 2 weeks of insurance. And then in the beginning of June, a record heat wave hit Hungary, with record drought hit Hungary. 2 record heat waves hit Hungary with record high temperatures as well. And by the second week of June, we'd used up all of our rainwater backup. And so we had 0 irrigation all the way until it began to rain again in August. And the forest, except for 1 tree, survived. Now, you have to understand that we have this is a natural natural succession forest. It grows like an open field, where we have 100 square meters of space that we've remitigated, but we have over 200 trees in that space. So that, when I say trees, I mean the smallest saplings to these trees that you can see on the screen. And that gave us, we accidentally sort of made a Miyawaki forest, if you know what those are, this intense planting, which we thought of as just handing control to nature for the design part, letting nature decide what can grow there. That gave us an advantage that we would appreciate much later. So I have to say that trusting nature was the key to this project in many ways. Can we go to the next slide? So this is basically what how the system functions. We collect and transform a lot of organic waste, and that reconnects the carbon cycle. The carbon doesn't go to the incinerator or it isn't trucked out of town. It stays in the district, and that's valuable organic carbon waste that you can put back into the ground and put it to work for you. We built up the soil with this compost, and this organic waste compost made from the organic waste, and covered the ground. And when we did that, we cut holes through that parking lot. So naturally, thinking that the trees would need space to grow deep roots. And when, just a side anecdote, that the Budapest landscape architect came and looked at our project, and we were very happy that we had survived the summer last year. And he said, "Oh, that's because all those trees are grown from seed." And we looked at him, we didn't really get it. And he told us that he has to buy trees that are 10 or 15 years old, and they come from a tree farm, and the tap root that's the deepest root gets cut off then, and very often can't grow back. So the trees that are planted in the cities are not able to sustain themselves with groundwater. They can't get to the groundwater. And we looked on the map, and we're only 4 meters above groundwater, and we have more than 10-meter trees now. So, and a 14-meter poplar in the middle. So we were watering these trees last summer with the leftover water, and we should have been watering the smaller ones because they're all drinking from the Danube now. So, that was another accidental benefit of just trusting in the natural cycles. We also, what we did pay for was usually out of pocket. We bought cover crops and lots of little seeds that would grow, hardy seeds that could grow anywhere. And we tried our best to get as much growth during the growth season as we could, because that means biomass that will fill up the soil, and that biomass will turn into carbon, which can, or turn into a carbon form that can hold on to rainwater longer. And then like I mentioned before, the intensive planting began to benefit us early on, when we realized that it's for most gardeners in the culture in Hungary, it's very anti-intuitive that like plants suck up this water to cool the air around them. And if there are more trees in that air, they use less water, which is strange to think about, that you get more tree support with less water if you plant them together. It's logical, but it's not necessarily obvious. And we saw the effects of this. We saw how it helped us, helped protect the soil, keep the temperatures of the ground cool, and keep the plants alive even through record-breaking heat. So our project is now totally self-sufficient. We need to be there for one thing, we have lots of trees that we have to eat the fruit off of. They're now producing more and more fruit, but we also have to keep the space livable for people. So we keep the paths cleared, and we help people compost. But the compost that we make, even the compost that we make, is now superfluous for us, because the trees are large enough to produce their own biomass. So now, trusting in nature for 5 years and giving her a little lift up until the cycling can get going has given us a way to pay the community back for their volunteer work, and we give all of our compost away. In 1 square meter of the garden, the one square meter compost that we have, the composting method gets the compost done in 6 weeks, which means roughly we're doing 10 cubic meters of compost per year. And we also, from this, we also give away trees. We also give away plants. We're tree rich. We have no money, but we're tree rich, and that's a very interesting resource now when people are talking about greening their own backyards, because they're feeling the heat of last year's heat wave and the heat wave in 2022. So we also discuss. Our job is also to discuss and give speeches and talks and presentations and workshops about climate issues and environmental issues, which doesn't happen so much. It's happening more and more here in Budapest, but it wasn't happening so much in a lot of the community gardens that were around town. We have knowledge sharing and like I said, workshops, and this local experience is a really important thing, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about how allelopathic something is, or how these trees work. There's a lot of sort of legacy knowledge that you get from your grandmother that doesn't really apply to the present situation and with present scientific knowledge, and sometimes not without consideration for the climate. So we're not necessarily scientists at all, but we do pay a lot of attention to science, and we say, here's the example where this works. You know, and one of those examples, and I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it, but one of those things that that's kind of controversial for us is that we decided to leave the invasive species in our garden and use them to fix the land. And we decided this because that in the most ethical way we could, we checked for nature areas in near downtown Budapest, and I think the closest one's about 2.5 kilometers away, and we understood the species, and when the C4C advisor came and talked to us, she gave us an incredible help understanding how to keep that in sort of keep those invasive species in control if we want to use them in our context. Now, if we had been at the edge of a forest or at the edge of town even, we might be too close to use some of those invasive species. But here in the heart of Budapest, we've shown how somehow to keep them in control and not be afraid that they're going to take over the soil. But in extreme situations like a parking lot, this might be an interesting solution that could be helpful ethically, if you consider it ethically not. So we get to talk about a lot of these issues, and some of these are very common questions. Are there really any bad bugs? How much water is stored in soil? This is a very, very misunderstood question that, you know, people put trees in the ground here, but they don't take care of the soil. So there's no space for the water that they're putting on the trees to go, except off into the street. So we're trying to work on that with a couple of soil workshops this summer. The whole question of what's native in a city climate is a very hot topic for us in the garden, and we hear from a lot of different people. And is the climate invasive now? That's a really interesting question that we've been stumped by. And then, of course, every day someone asks us, can I compost this? Can I compost that? And we tell them as well as we can how to compost. Many more materials than are usually compost in the compost centers around Budapest. So because we take care of it and are there twice a week, we guarantee that these things will compost. And so some materials like tropical fruits, we can compost them without fear that the pesticides won't that might be on them won't break down fast enough. Another very important part of the garden.
Mark,
yes.
Mark, could I just let you know you really have only 1 minute left?
Okay,
You've gone over quite a bit.
Yeah, I got
so
6
could you wrap
hours
it
of
up,
minutes.
please?
You have to come
Thanks.
visit us. But
yeah,
citizen
tricky.
science is a great thing for us. We've put all of the we've documented all the plant species and bug species that we have. Next slide, please. Yeah, and it's brought us to the point where we have to figure out what to do, where to go next. The person who owns our property is considering selling, and we have to find a solution to try to save this. And we're wondering why there isn't already a solution to somehow protect spaces that are functioning. And these are some of the questions that we've been thinking about. And I think the next slide is just a thank you and goodbye. You can check our online, you can contact me through the Facebook page or through the online, the website. And we did make a movie last summer, which will explain it in 13 minutes, I think.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so
Thank
much,
you
Mark.
for your patience.
Yeah, no, it was, of course, a great example of a local level initiative. And for For those who didn't understand some of the abbreviations, C4C refers to the Communities for Climate pilot action that we put in the chat earlier. So this was just one of 50 local initiatives. And I'm going to move quickly to the next speaker, Andi Linder, who is leading on the Agroforestry and Sieben Linden project. He's been shifting his work and engagement in the recent years from the renewable energy sector to now renewable agriculture. And his current main focus is, of course, the establishment of agroforestry systems in the Altmark region, of building a network on this topic. So the floor is yours, Andi.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for inviting me. I think I have to quit one microphone here. Sorry. I had some helicopter surrounding the area. It might get loud. There seems to be an emergency. I'm living in a quite rural area, but
we don't hear anything.
Okay. Okay. Hi. No, I'll try again. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Shannon.
You misunderstood me. We don't hear the helicopter. It was working better before. Now there's the echo. So if you could go back the way you were, I apologize for confusing you.
Okay. No, it should be fine then. So thanks a lot for the invitation. And yeah, we are right in the intersection of like intentional communities and the topic of nature restoration. So there's a big initiative in the area of Sieben Linden, which is the intentional community, which is roughly here in Germany, which is a community of 150 people with the focus on ecology. And I haven't been there when the initiative started, and all those trees got planted already. I started in the project this year, and I'm like, part of the result of the C4C project, or the result of what happened in the last years. But I will come to that in a minute. Eva Stützel is the one who had taken the lead on the project, the C4C project, and yeah, we see her also here in the picture, working together with the Thematic expert, Burkhard Kaiser, in a planning workshop they did already last year. And I like to stress that in this area, this is an area with one of the lowest densities in population in Germany. So we have large distances, big fields, and yeah, this is also a challenge to connect it, but I will take a minute later on to talk about this. So what happened? We have this initiative of a lot of people, and we see some of them here in the picture who were like already working on agroforestry and nature restoration voluntarily in the last years. And some people had the idea to make this more institutional, and asked around for funding, and they got funding last year, found funding with the partners down here, with the funding bodies you see down here. And we have the association now on board. They found the Agroforestry Association really helpful to start the project, to make it more formal. And also a group of people that are calling them Agroforest Altmark. This is the area where Sieben Linden is also located. And you will see all those people here kicking off the project, knowing now there is some funding. I haven't been really part of this in the beginning. I just came into the project in February this year, when it was clear that we could set up an office for this topic. And together with Simone here, I started in the beginning of this year, so I have the chance to promote nature restoration through agroforestry, and also to use this network that's already there. And there are so many people helpful to get to the point that we have this institution now, the office, the agroforestry office now, And there was already the chance, it was quite incredible, the first months of this year, and also quite stressful for me there, because we had the chance, because of the connections to the locals here, also to the people living in the Altmark, we had the chance already to plant two sites, two demonstration sites, that we can use to show the farmers around that agroforestry is not something for like something exotic or something that let's put it the other way around in a positive way, is something that is feasible also in an economic way. And we have one system on a farm where we set up two agroforestry stripes, two stripes of apple trees. And I think the helicopter is starting again. I hope this is okay. Well, and we have a second system set up that has a focus on high-grade wood and firewood. That's a little bit, and I'd like to follow Mark and with the idea of like nature knows it already. We used here already. We used here also plants that were quite young. Not the standard to use is like use the plants that were already in a height of 2 meters or so, and start with them coming from the forest school, from the plant school. What we did here is like using old sorts, old plant types, and putting really small trees into the ground so they can develop the roots, in the soil. So this was only possible because there was so much support in the area. There was already this lively network. I'd like to come to the current status, what did we do else since we started? We set up a group of regulars. So we have people in the area, and we'd like to invite more people in the area to join us in regular meetings on the topic. And this should be our place to connect with each other and to help each other on topics that people have. And yeah, a typical format in the area is, or typical area in farming is to set up field days. And we invited external speakers and invited the local community, and there were people from the ministries, from the communal sector, from farming, farmers were there, and also from the forest sector. And we brought all those people together in one field day, and we would like to have more field days in the future to get people on board to get a possibility to show that this is also something that they could set up to bring everybody on board on this topic. And we have a small office now for this year, because the funding is only lasting till 2020, end of 2025. So the funding is still an open question that we have. And all this, what we want to do is we want to build new agroforestry systems, or help people in setting them up. So we don't want to be the ones planting them, but enabling people to build agroforestry systems. So what did we learn in the project? You can see here one of the oldest agroforestry systems in Sieben Linden that was already community-based or community-led. And what we learned now is that it was only possible through all those people, Eva, who helped us in creating the community aspect to also reflect on what we need to do to plan on what we need as a project. We need the thematic experts, people who know the soil, who know the area. We can't. I'm coming from Hamburg, originally from the south of Germany, and I'm not connected to the soil, to the earth, in the Altmark yet so much. So it's really necessary that we connect with the people and get them on board. That people who are living there, and yeah, this enabled us to build those two demonstration sites. And one thing that is really necessary, also one learning that we had it. You know, I'm coming, and also Sieben Linden is somehow in this eco bubble, I would say. So there's like a bubble that has all the ecological focus already, and it's so important that we go out of that. We need to talk to the people who and understand what are their needs, and not let's say point or bring our perspective to them, but rather like in the permaculture, the first principle is, I think, observe. And I'd like to be humble in a way, and first to understand what the people really need, and then see how we can help a little bit, or help people, or work together on making a project, setting up a project with agroforestry. Yeah. And one pragmatic example was that all the tools we needed, all the machinery we needed to set this up, was coming also from people who were not those organic farmers, you know, not the ecological bubble. We had support from, and this was fantastic. We had support from the conventional farmers, and yeah, this is really a good thing. And we also need to elaborate on this, or establish more on this. And at the same time, this is a little bit of a complex thing, because what I mentioned before, the area is quite rural, the distances are high, the structures are like, we have really big farms, 1,000 hectares of a farm is normal, you know. And what we did here is like, the first farm is also 350 hectares big, but this is only a small thing that we did there. And we need to see what is the lever to get also the big ones playing with us, and yeah, how to include them. This is a question that we have. So I'm quite glad that I could that I have the chance to work in this project now. And yeah, what we learned also last year is that the funding constraints that were there, and the timing issues that came with that, I don't know yet how to deal with that this year. If we come back, right now our perspective is to establish the office also in the next years, but that we still need support there if we want to do this as a job, as an office. There's a lot of volunteering, of course, and I also like to volunteer a lot in this area. But you need also some people who do this as a job to make the bigger projects possible. And the funding constraints, they were quite interesting. Or let's say interesting is a euphemism. What I learned last year is that one of the funding bodies said, okay, we give you some money, but that's only half of what we told you before. And then we had to check how to make this work now. Or they put rules to the money that we didn't expect. So no money for labor, for example. And then there is this criticality with the timing, and because we ask for funding at some point, and so this was last year, maybe second quarter or first quarter. I know this only from distance, and then we got feedback in November. The letter was that there is a funding possible, which was great, but at the same time there was no one working on this, or who said like who was free or available to work in this project. So, and the funding letter said also that we have only 2025 to work on it if we want to use this money. So it was really a short time to find people to work on this, and I'm really happy that we are now two people, Simone and me, and all the supporting people around. And I hope this will be a little bit less stressful for this year from the expectation that I got from last year. So that's a question on economic sustainability. I'd say also in the projects we have an agroforestry, it's not per se that people or the farmers go and see this as an option in their economic design or like in the economic calculation, because the funding is compared to what they get from the European farmers funding, the GAP. It's in German. I actually don't know what's this in English. The money they get for the work on the fields is way higher than for the agroforestry. So the nature restoration is not really in the focus of the funding on the European level and also on the local level. So it's a hard job also for us to see what is the economic design. How can we make it feasible for people, for farmers that are already not in a position to have too much free time, I guess. So what I learned so far, or what people who I know so far, don't seem to be like that they have a lot of capacity to look for natural restoration. So it's our job also to look on at that. How can we create funding for them? How can we want to support people in making this economic question a little bit easier? Yeah. I don't know what's my time now. I didn't look at the time.
I think it's great, Andy.
Sorry?
It's great. You're doing well with the timing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll jump in at this stage. And just to say, I'm Laura. I work as a network weaver for ECOLISE, and I also had the opportunity to support with the expert pool coordination and community of practice and supporting kind of on the back end, the on the ground support to the C4C project. So it's so nice to hear from both of you, Andi and Mark. It's a real pleasure to see it alive and like through your faces and stories and pictures to get a sense of the place. I did have a chance to visit the agroforestry, one of the sites in Sieben, Linden, when I was there recently for an event. So it's super nice to see the reality of it and feel the creativity and passion and care and knowledge that you're putting into making these projects become real and continue to grow and evolve and have a positive impact. So that's great. And I think at this point we can probably stop the slide share and we'll just have around 15 minutes for a question and answer to all of the three main speakers of the webinar today. I've already caught a few of the questions coming in from the chat. So if you have further questions, feel free to drop them in. And we can start off with the ones that were already shared. And maybe also as encouragement, Paul, I think you're still with us. If you have any questions to the community project, maybe there's also an interesting dimension, feel free to bring them in and vice versa. We can also have a bit of a dialogue across those different experiences. And yeah, so one question for you, Mark, that came in. You spoke about different kind of capacities that are needed, the developing local initiatives that also work with governance or have some kind of political support, topic about resources, both very creatively, but also funding and skills or competences that are needed.
Yeah.
So a key question that came in is what is a driver for the longevity of projects? And you shared the challenge with that. So curious if there's
for us, it's pretty clear. We and I think Paul might have mentioned this earlier that that without a climate plan, without a concrete climate plan and data, the local government is very sympathetic to our project, and they have a very positive climate plan about doing more of this and putting more green spaces and more trees and more interaction and everything, but they don't have the ability to say how much more and tell us where we are in the scale. So when we're approached, so when we reach the stage, which happens to almost all the green spaces in Budapest, this might be a local problem, but very often the green initiatives are started and community gardens are started and spaces are greened, and then the property is sold by either the owner or the by the local government if it's their property, and then nothing happens. Nothing. It can't continue because land use is really not planned for, and we don't know how much green space we need to bring the temperature down in small neighborhoods, you know, and how much the temperature control our green space, for example, is doing for its neighbors. And we can see that it's very much connected to the real estate market, which personally I think is you know, really crazy right now. So it means there's the government is working to avoid the infrastructure in the streets and spending a lot of money to make green issues happen in the streets, but very small initiatives for a lot of money and a lot of time. And then in places where we got lucky that we're on private property, but we're always vulnerable to being sold off and chopped down. And if we consider that basically the environmental things happen all the time, but if we want to help the climate, we need to keep the carbon in the soil.
Yeah,
And if
long
they chop
term.
it down, then it goes into the incinerator, goes back up, and it's over. And we don't lose just carbon, we lose 6 years of carbon work. And that forest system that we've built is giving dividends back now. It's in the positive loop where we have too much now, and it's putting that energy back into its own survival, which is great. But how do you value that? So you know, local district laws about this stuff could help. And like programs, we're all trying to figure out how to. I don't know how to write laws, how to write regulations for real estate, and how to ask for carbon neutral. You know, how to even measure a carbon neutral building. You know, that's beyond my capacity. But I know that this real estate, this forest that we've created, is much more valuable than just the real estate price. So that would be a really great way that's a very big obstacle, and would be a really great way to help small initiatives become long-term, you know, have some sort of longevity.
Yeah, thank you for that detailed response, and also a few different ideas and suggestions to share. I think from the project documentation, I also remember a term that just stuck with me that you've shared, which is forever green spaces.
Yeah,
that concept of longevity, you know, and it's I don't know if that term is widely used, but for me it just stuck in my mind because I think it really speaks to the whole story that you shared, and really the necessity not just to develop something for a few years and then cut it down or build the next skyscraper on it or something, but to actually have
it's very hard. Oh, I'm sorry. It's very difficult for the city to move infrastructure. They value it so much, and it's very expensive, but they don't value green infrastructure, and yet it's now becoming equally important and urgent to really concentrate on getting the green infrastructure right, because it's only going to get more expensive as the extremes get worse.
Okay. It's also for anybody here in the call, if you have a question, you can also raise your hand. Otherwise, I have maybe two questions that build a bit on what has been shared in the presentation. One to Paul and one to Andy. I'll just share them together, and then you can answer one after the other. So for Paul, I think it was really relevant that you talked about the nature restoration law and the requirement for member states to come up with plans by September 2026, if I remember right, what you shared. And also having heard those two, you know, grassroots citizen initiatives and examples, could you expand a bit more how you see citizens can really engage with lobbying, but also maybe beyond, or in what specific ways? Like, what would really support people working on those plans to pick up these kind of projects and solutions and make sure they have the infrastructure, the space, and the long-term opportunities to really develop and flourish. And question to Andi, so you can already think about it. Knowing also Sieben Linden as an eco-village, it's a place that already has, I don't know, 2 decades or something of innovation on many environmental and also social issues. So I was curious if you could speak a bit more about like scaling or replicating innovation into the whole region, which I know is a big goal of the Impulse office. Okay, maybe Paul.
Yeah, I mean, if I just start, every country has got to come up with a nature restoration plan. And what we had in this last meeting were representatives from Slovakia, Spain, and one other country, I think, I forget where it was. But these are the people who've got to write it. And what they are doing is a whole range of different stakeholder consultations of one sort or another, some written, some local, some going round. Now, I don't know what would be what in each country, but I think if you in your own country find out what nature restoration plan is in your local language and put that into Google, you'll find out those contacts. And I think there are plenty of consultations going on, and we just need to keep replying to those and keep pushing for the things that we want. Increasing green space in urban environment. I mean, why not have a target for this? This is what the sort of thing that we want to do, a certain number of them or certain space of them. That's what we should be pushing for, because you're absolutely right. Unless we have something written in, requirements on people, indicators, requirements, it's not going to happen. People will find better things to do. So I don't have all those details here, but it's the nature restoration plan. Every member state's got to do one. Everybody's doing their stakeholder consultation. They're not really sure how to write it. So let's us get on and give them ideas. I think that would be what I'd say right now.
Great, thank you so much. So maybe Andi, you can share, and also in the chat, it's interesting to see, maybe I'll just make a quick comment on this, now different legislation also in different countries. See, there's positive example of Scotland, where there's legislation that supports more community-based land ownership. So it's maybe also a way to learn from that across different countries in Europe and find ways to leverage such good project examples, but also good examples of legislation that supports community initiatives to push for that kind of change. All right, Andi, over to you.
Question you ask really is in the heart of the questions we have today. So how to, and there's so much experience in community building in Sieben Linden. This is an intentional community, and people have so many tools on how to interact, how to set up projects. But a lot of the projects were in Sieben Linden. They were not in the region yet. So there, and also on the nature restoration topic on agroforestry, there's so much knowledge and how to build those bridges out there. This is a question that is really lively discussed, I think, right now. And for me personally, what I see or what I learned in those few months now is that we need to go out. We need to get out of our bubble. We need to go to the people, and we can't wait till people come to us. So this is one thing. Is also being proactive, being like going out and seeking people for their experience, and not saying we have a better knowledge because we did that for 20 years now, but first understanding where people are right now. So this is like building a connection, and there's a lot of relationship, I think, in the first place to be done. So seeing who is interested in talking to us on this topic, and yeah, the other thing that I have in mind is the economy, the economics of all that. And we're talking to the ministries, and we have this topic of national implementation, and we don't have this as a federal state. Germany is a federal state. We not only have the Germany as a whole legislation or like the rules that we have there, but we have this also in all of the states. And so we are seeking to talk to the people here where plans haven't been implemented. So we have some, like the action plan on climate that was already there in Saxony-Anhalt 4 years ago, which hasn't been implemented yet. And this is a level where we try to talk to the decision makers, to the people in the ministries, to see if we can set up this window of opportunity, like for the farmers, because the farmers won't, if they don't have the ideology on, it's my opinion a little bit, but it's not the whole truth, it's shortened. The people won't react if there's no economic incentive, because they have already economic stress. Most of the farmers in Germany, we have the farms dying already. Like the digits are like, we have more than like 4-digit count on farms dying each year, mostly the small farms who are leaving their farms because they can't do this anymore. And then it's hard. It's not a good way to tell people they would need to do also something for nature if they can't survive in this economic environment. So this is something we want to work on also in the local politics, let's say, and see if there is something to be created, like a window of opportunity. Yeah.
Great, thank you for sharing. And I think the responses and also the different like stories from both of the projects really highlight the necessity for cooperation within the group, but then also with other local stakeholders, farmers, municipalities, researchers, policymakers, and so on. That stands out really strongly. And I also appreciate different examples you both shared around being creative and resourceful within maybe economic challenges or space challenges, using maybe waste as a resource, using what's there, generating different ideas, redefining what wealth is, tree wealthy. I remember that from you, Mark, and other ways. So if anybody still has, since the topic here is also on innovation, if you have any last point, maybe just one sentence on like one innovative idea that you think is worth spreading, you could maybe use that as a roundup for our Q&A section.
There's also an innovative question directed towards Paul about the area providing a template for the national plans.
Yeah, it's not for Rare to do. DG Environment is providing a template. They provided a template. Does it have enough detail? I mean, it depends on what you're looking at, but it tries to ensure that there are targets and indicators and so on to make sure that these are really followed up. And I just seen the question about the transition to regenerative agriculture to organic agriculture. Absolutely, it's an expensive business, and I have seen a lot of farmers who have gone fully organic, but I've also seen a lot who don't want to go organic because the risk is too high, but they're already changing what they do, because we can't just ignore the 80–70% of farmers who will anyway remain the classical way, but they still need to improve what they're doing. I think most of them are committed to do it. You can move towards regenerative agriculture or regenerative forestry without needing to take that full step to organic, which is perhaps too risky. So every farmer can actually do better with fewer inputs even today. And I think that's probably the way that things are going, a little bit less emphasis on organic itself, but a lot more emphasis, let's move everyone along the way to doing better, to having lower inputs and being more sustainable.
Well, I guess checking with time, Shannon, I should pass it over to you at this stage. But thank you so much for your contributions and responses to the questions.
Yeah, and thanks to you, Laura. Thanks. My task now is to invite everyone just a moment to turn on their cameras if they'd like to be included in a family picture. And I imagine we will be untagged so that it's this portfolio scenario of everyone. If you'd like to show yourselves, you would be in a joint picture, probably on social media that will be promoted following this event. We will, as already said, we'll be sharing the PowerPoint presentations with you. And we've included in the chat also an evaluation form that we'd welcome your feedback on, so that we can continue to grow and improve the webinars and moving forward. As always, it's a challenge to meet the different needs and interests of the participants when their levels of expertise vary so dramatically from a beginner to an expert. So yeah, I hope we came midway for those. And I'd also like to take the time now to thank my colleagues for organizing this webinar, and of course, all of you for participating. There's so many events and competing opportunities these days, so it's really a pleasure to have you here at our opening launch event. I'm just thinking, Julian, don't we have to adapt the format of the pictures?
It is, don't worry.
Okay. Because I think once we see enough people with their cameras, we can adapt the profile and take the picture.
Okay, yes. So I will count to 3. So you're gonna smile and be prepared. So let's see. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Great. And thanks for that. So thanks again to everyone, and we will be in touch soon with the follow-up to this event. There will be further ELIF events coming up in September, October, and November, so stay tuned.